Right now on Wall Street in New York, millions of dollars worth of transactions are happening every second. Many companies, including the world's top 10, are buying and selling shares here. The decisions that determine the fate of the world economy are made on this narrow street. Wall Street today is the undisputed symbol of modern capitalism. But do you know where Wall Street was founded? Not in a stock exchange or a meeting room, not in a bank. It was founded in a coffee house. New York was still a small port city with only a few thousand people. Its streets were muddy, its buildings wooden, but every day ships from England, the Netherlands, and the Caribbean docked at this small city's harbor. Merchants were constantly buying and selling. Ship cargoes were changing hands. News was passing from one person to another. But there was no reliable center for this trade. Merchants didn't know where to meet. They didn't know which prices were valid. They didn't know who to trust. Every transaction was scattered, insecure, and chaotic. And it was precisely this gap that a coffee house filled. But why a coffee house? To understand this, we first need to understand coffee itself. Coffee reached Europe in the mid-17th century. And everywhere it arrived, it did the same thing. It woke people up, both figuratively and literally. Europeans of that era preferred to drink beer in the mornings, beer at breakfast, beer at lunch, because water wasn't safe and beer was the cheapest alternative. A day that started slightly alcoholic continued slightly alcoholic. Minds were foggy. Decisions were made slowly. Europe was like a sleepwalker. Coffee changed everything. People who drank coffee became more alert, more focused, more productive. When Europe's first coffee houses opened, these venues were not just places that sold drinks. Merchants, journalists, philosophers, politicians, they all gathered here. Ideas were shared, and the best ideas always came from these coffeehouse environments. News spread, deals were made at tables. The coffeehouse suddenly became Europe's most important communication center. This transformation happened much earlier in London. In 1688, a man named Edward Lloyd opened a small coffeehouse on the banks of the Thames. Maritime news was shared here. Ship cargoes were insured here. Merchants made deals at tables. Insurers wrote policies. That small coffeehouse grew over time, became institutionalized, and transformed into Lloyd's of London, today the world's largest insurance company. A coffeehouse had given birth to a global financial giant. And the same thing would happen in New York before long. If you're also one of those people who can't wake up without coffee, subscribe to my channel and write your favorite coffee in the comments. In the 1690s, a small coffee house opened on Water Street in New York. Its name was Merchant's Coffee House. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary place. Wooden tables, a timber counter, a few lanterns hanging from the walls. But inside, it was anything but ordinary. Every morning, as soon as the doors opened, New York's most important merchants, whose purpose was not merely to drink coffee, would pour inside. While coffee was being drunk at the tables, negotiations were held about ship cargoes. The cotton one man was selling was being traded for the sugar another man was buying. Tobacco coming from the Caribbean, furs heading to London, grain expected from Boston. Everything was being priced at these tables. Price news from London, sinking ships, war developments, all critical information was first heard here. The coffeehouse functioned simultaneously as a stock exchange, a newspaper, and a chamber of commerce. For merchants, not coming here meant being left outside the market. But there was a serious problem. Everything was done off the record. Deals were made verbally. Prices were inconsistent from day to day. Trust was entirely dependent on personal relationships. If you knew someone, you could do business. If you didn't, everything carried risk. And as New York grew, this system began to fall short. By the 1750s, New York's trade had grown dozens of times over. Now, not just local merchants, but investors coming from London, Boston, Philadelphia, and even Amsterdam wanted a share of this market. For these foreign investors, the trust problem was much greater. Verbal agreements were not enough to trust an unknown man thousands of kilometers away and invest money. Written rules, set prices, and a reliable system were needed. And it was precisely this need that led to one of history's most important agreements in Wall Street in 1792. May 17, 1992. Under the spring sun, in the shade of a giant buttonwood tree on Wall Street, 24 merchants came together. In their hands was a short but extremely important document. The document they signed was called the Buttonwood Agreement. With this agreement, the merchants accepted two fundamental rules. They would only do business directly with each other, and they would never go below an agreed-upon commission rate. These two simple rules laid the foundation of Wall Street. The Buttonwood Agreement is today recognized as the official founding document of the New York Stock Exchange. And the great majority of those 24 merchants were men who had been doing business over coffee at Merchants' Coffee House for years. The trust that made the agreement possible had been built slowly over the years at those tables around those coffee cups. Wall Street had been born in a coffee house in the truest sense of the word. By liking the video, you can help more people discover this unexpected corner of history. After the Buttonwood Agreement was signed, New York's merchants began searching for a more organized and reliable venue. Doing business under a buttonwood tree was not possible in every weather condition. Snow in winter months, heavy rain or heat in summer. You can't have a stock exchange outdoors. And in 1793, Tontine Coffee House was built to meet this need. Tontine Coffee House was nothing like ordinary coffee houses. It was a special structure jointly financed by merchants and designed entirely for the purpose of trade. The two-story wooden building rose at the corner where Wall Street met Water Street. On the ground floor, people drank coffee and held small-scale daily negotiations. On the upper floor, more formal meetings and negotiations took place. Regular auctions were held every morning, and stocks, bonds, and commodities changed hands here. Tontine Coffee House was New York's first real stock exchange building, and it had simultaneously become the city's most important information center. Because in the late 18th century, journalism was not yet considered an institutional profession. News spread by word of mouth, was carried by letters, or was heard in coffee houses. Tontine Coffee House had become the very center of this information flow. If a ship sank, it was first heard here. War news spread here. Economic developments coming from Europe were debated here. The person who reached the right information fastest was the person who made the most profitable transaction, and the path to reaching this information fastest went through Tontine Coffee House. One of the names who best understood this environment was America's first Secretary of Treasury, Alexander Hamilton. Hamilton was an intelligent and calculating politician. He had a thorough grasp of this extraordinary influence coffee houses had in the world of commerce. In 1790, Hamilton was trying to bring his plan to establish America's first national bank to life. This plan was extremely controversial, both politically and economically. Many states wanted to preserve their independent financial structures. The idea of a central bank faced great resistance. Hamilton chose a different path instead of official platforms to break this resistance. He came to Tontine Coffee House. He sat one-on-one with merchants at tables. He explained his plan, answered their questions, and convinced skeptical investors one by one. Official speeches were being made in halls, but the real persuasion was happening around coffee cups. America's first national bank was sold in a coffee house. If you enjoy these stories, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. In every video, I tell the surprising story of something on your table.
Tontine Coffeehouse became the place where New York's financial heart beat from 1793 onwards. Every morning, as soon as the doors opened, merchants would pour inside. Stocks, bonds, commodities, everything changed hands inside this building. But this structure was only a beginning, because in the early 19th century, New York was growing so fast that a small coffeehouse building could no longer carry this growing financial system. In 1817, the merchants gathered at Tontine Coffeehouse made a historic decision. A more formal, more permanent, and larger structure was now needed. The New York Stock Exchange was officially founded. A fixed membership system was established. Daily trading hours were determined. Rules were written down one by one. A formal financial institution took the place of verbal agreements and coffeehouse negotiations. The coffeehouse had transformed into a stock exchange. But the story didn't end there. Because coffee's role on Wall Street did not come to an end when the institution gained official status. On the contrary, it deepened further. Throughout the 19th century, the coffeehouses around Wall Street continued to remain an inseparable part of financial culture. Before morning trading hours began, merchants met in coffeehouses and determined the day's strategy. During lunch breaks, investors calculated opportunities and risks in coffeehouses. And in the evenings, that day's gains and losses were once again discussed in coffeehouses. Coffee was not just a drink, it was the social glue of this entire financial system. And this legacy is still very much alive today. The headquarters of the world's largest financial companies are still clustered around Wall Street. In the lobbies, meeting rooms, and office floors of these companies, coffee machines never stop. From Goldman Sachs to JP Morgan, from Morgan Stanley to Citibank, coffee still holds a central place in the culture of all these financial giants. Major deals are still made over coffee today. Crisis meetings start with coffee. The analyst who comes to the office at 5 in the morning and the CEO who sits down for afternoon negotiations both sit with a cup of coffee in hand. Today, more than 2 billion cups of coffee are drunk around the world every day. A significant portion of this coffee is drunk while financial decisions are made, while negotiations are conducted, and while agreements are signed. Wall Street was born in a coffeehouse, and that coffeehouse spirit still lives in every corner of Wall Street today. If you have a cup of coffee in your hand right now, you should be seeing it a little differently. Like the video and subscribe to the channel. Everything on your table has a story like this.